We acknowledge the traditional owners, the Inangai people, and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging.
I'm Regan.
Hi, I'm Kate. Hi, I'm Liz.
I'm Jacob.
I'm Lisa. I'm Kat.
Hi, I'm David.
I'm Nat.
I'm a doctor at Longreach.
I'm a physiotherapist.
I'm a registered nurse. I'm an occupational therapist.
I'm a podiatrist.
And I'm a midwife. I'm the allied health team leader. I'm a physiotherapist.
Health Workforce Queensland welcomes you to Go Rural virtually and to the community of Longreach. But before we start, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm hosting Go Rural virtually from the lands of the Turrbal and Yagara peoples. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we gather tonight and any First Nations people participating in this webinar. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging and celebrate the diversity of First Nations people and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters of Australia. Hello everyone, my name is Meredith and I have the pleasure of being your host tonight. We're very excited to have on board a fantastic panel of Longreach health professionals. The panel includes general practitioners, registered nurses, a midwife, physiotherapists, occupational therapists, and a podiatrist. We know you'll also have questions for the panel, so please use the question and answer tab at the bottom of the page, which I will monitor and direct to the panel on your behalf throughout the presentation. Please bear with us if we experience any technical difficulties. Hopefully that won't happen. So before we begin, I'm just going to ask each panelist to introduce themselves. So I will start with Claire. Claire, if you could introduce yourself to everyone.
Hi, I'm Claire Walker. I'm one of the GPs here in Longreach.
And beside you?
Hi, I'm David Walker. I am the Executive Director of Medical Services for the Central West HHS, but also work as a GP in Longreach.
And we'll go next to Natalie Parrish.
Hey, I'm Natalie. I am a registered nurse and a registered midwife and working at the Longreach Hospital for the Central West Health Service.
Thanks, Nat. And Kat.
Hi, I'm Kat. I'm a registered nurse and I work at Longreach Hospital.
And next we'll go to Liz.
Hi, I'm Liz. My current role is the Acting Director of Allied Health. My substantive role is the Allied Health Team Leader and my background is occupational therapy. And my role covers the whole of the Central West HHS as well.
Thank you, Liz. And Dr. David Rimmer.
G'day, I'm David Rimmer. I'm working as a GP in Longreach and involved in a few other bits and pieces that white hair tends to attract.
Thank you, David. And Jacob.
Hi guys, I'm Jacob. I'm one of the podiatrists based in Longreach Hospital, but I work across the whole of the Central West also.
Thank you, Jacob. And Lisa.
Hello, my name's Lisa. I'm one of the occupational therapists also covering the entire Central West.
Welcome, Lisa. And Regan.
Hey everyone, my name's Regan. I'm one of the senior physiotherapists that, similar to some of the other allied health professionals, work across the Central West.
Hi Regan and Kate.
Yep, and I'm Kate. I'm also a physiotherapist working across the Central West.
So welcome everyone and thank you for your time tonight. Really looking forward to having a great discussion with you all. But I'd like to start our discussion tonight with three practitioners who are all relative newcomers to Longreach, to find out what made them choose to go rural. So, Kat, you started working in Longreach at the beginning of 2020 as a registered nurse. However, it's often said that a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. So as a student, which steps would you identify were a significant part of your rural career journey?
Hi everyone, and thanks for having me along, Meredith. So I actually worked in the corporate sector, and my partner and I decided that we wanted to go and live and work in a rural community. I'd always had, I guess, an idea that I wanted to get into healthcare eventually. So I decided to go and do a nursing degree. And effectively, it was halfway through that first year in the degree that I thought that I would probably end up in a rural community nursing. I went to ACU in Brisbane and I started looking around and searching the web for potential opportunities for students in terms of immersion programs or scholarships. And in fact, I contacted Health Workforce Queensland, and that's when I spoke to Meredith. And Meredith and I spoke about the Grow Rural Immersion Program, which kicked off in Central West in 2017. And I was lucky enough to get into that program. So I was involved with Grow Rural, but a couple of other steps I took were I got into the Student Network club in Southeast Queensland, which was Tropic. So I became quite involved with them. I also decided, well, I investigated what graduate programs were around for nurses in the rural communities. So once I identified which ones I was interested in, I went ahead and organised placements. So I was very proactive in doing that through our placement office at ACU. I ended up going to Mount Isa. So I went to Northwest for a 3-week placement in my second year. And then once I identified that Central West was really my go-to, I went to Longreach at the end of 2017 and did a 3-week placement there and loved it and haven't looked back really. So I went into the graduate program. I started at Winton for 6 months and then ended up in Longreach for 6 months, and then was lucky enough to get a permanent position there as a registered nurse.
So perhaps many steps, Kat.
Yes.
Yeah, but I think it's important to note, how proactive you were, and how difference that makes. And when we have students approach us who are so proactive, such as yourself, it's a pleasure to work with you, and and to watch your journey. So thank you for sharing that. Regan, let's turn to you. Your pathway to Longreach involved gaining a position at Central West Hospital and Health Service with your partner Kate, who's also a physiotherapist. What were your expectations of rural practice, and have those expectations changed at all?
Thank you, Meredith. Look, I guess my introduction to the rural health setting was a little bit different to some. We were traveling through Europe at the start of the year and came back due to COVID. We fortunately quarantined in Brisbane safely and were looking for jobs, and one popped up out at Longreach. I think growing up in a big city, your impressions of what rural practice may look like or what the communities may entail can be quite different to what they actually are. And sometimes you have preconceived ideas that it may not be your interest, or it may not be something that you would ever consider but since being here, it's been completely different. Some of the big pros about being out here is the close-knit team and the really supportive community that has been almost unexpected, and that's something that we've really loved. And yeah, quite recently we've decided that we're planning on hanging around here for quite some time. So we're really looking forward to it.
And Kate, although you're a relative newcomer to Longreach, I understand you did a placement at the Longreach Hospital in 2016.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did.
So can you describe for us how that placement influenced your decision to return to Longreach or to go rural?
Yeah, sure. So I guess, like Regan said, this job popped up out of the blue to some extent, but I also really enjoyed my placement out here in Longreach. I really love the variety of the caseload that you could get. Like Regan said, it's a close-knit team, and I sort of felt that right from the start as a student. I definitely got to know like the other physio, I got to know the speechy. I knew Liz, I'm not sure if she remembered me, but I remembered her because she was the OT at the time. And so I had a fair idea that I thought, even though it might be challenging for us because it was something completely different, it would be something that we would enjoy because of the community vibe, and would both like a bit of a challenge in terms of our caseload, and maybe we could bring something different and learn some different skills here as well. So yeah, I think my placement here definitely prompted us to try a little bit harder with this position than maybe if we didn't know anything about it before.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So we don't have any questions at this point, but so what we'll do is we're going to move on to a video of a young man who is also a recently moved to Longreach. His name is Mete, and he has quite an interest in cars, which you'll see in the video that we're just about to play you.
I've never considered moving to a rural or remote location, let alone leave Melbourne. I've lived in Melbourne my whole life, but was finally offered a job in Longreach. I was expecting a small town with an ageing population. It was going to be hot and a challenge because of the isolation factor. I was prepared to stick it out for a year to get the experience I needed to get the job back in Melbourne. Almost 2 years later, and I'm still here, as my initial expectations were far from reality. There were so many others just like me, roughly the same age, all at the same stage of life, who I have now become good friends with. There's a great variety in the patients I see, and I have much more autonomy than I would have in the city. I've sold my sporty little car for a 4-wheel drive so I can better explore the region and do more camping with friends. There are definitely things about the city lifestyle I miss, but out here the amount of social activities and work-life balance is an added bonus, and it can be as social or as quiet as you make it out to be. I arrived expecting a lonely year in Longreach, but now am planning to stay for a few more years, because Longreach has definitely exceeded my expectations.
So feedback that we often get from students at Health Workforce Queensland is that rural placements offer them the opportunities to work with a broad range of presentations and to diversify their skills. So Jacob, I'd like to turn to you now and ask you, because you know what you would identify as the difference between working in a metro environment and working rurally, in terms of your practice, how that's been for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose I'm about 5 or 6 years out of uni. So my first job back in Sydney area was actually in aged care. And that was pretty well, you know, for podiatry, it's just pretty much one aspect, and it's just nail care essentially. If there's anything more serious than that, then you would just send on to another podiatrist sort of thing. And second to that, I then went into the public hospital system in New South Wales there, which was in a metro setting. And there you pretty well only just see wounds. It's just all diabetic foot wound care and that sort of thing. So coming out west, there I didn't really know what to expect, to be honest. And it was sort of on a whim. I just decided that I wanted to do a little bit of locuming around. There was a bit of a plan to save some money because you get accommodation provided in a locum. It pays reasonably well. So I came out to Longreach 2 years ago for 2 months, and I'm still here. And the decision around it, you know, after that 2 months essentially was because one of the reasons was basically the work out here is just much better than I anticipated. You could pretty well get a complete array of podiatry. So not only are you seeing the high risk foot, you're also seeing a lot of foot pain and biomechanics. You're seeing your general nail care, and you're doing nail surgeries as well. And some of that can be a little bit scary in the sense that I came here as the sole podiatrist, but the support you have from the Queensland statewide podiatry, your peers are just absolutely incredible. Not to mention you've got the GPs either in the hospital or just down the road if anything, you know, gets a little bit too scary. So I got to say, despite being here as a sole podiatrist, I've absolutely built a lot of confidence. Not having that support on the ground. So yeah, I would say compared to a metro setting, the diversity is just incredible.
And I think that's an important point, and one that I want to bring Dr. David Rimmer in on, because the diversification of practice speaks to rural generalism. David, can you just briefly expand on what it means to be a rural generalist for us?
So there is currently a nationally agreed definition of a rural generalist in medicine, which came out of the Collingwood Agreement, and that is basically that you have very good general practice skills. It's a primary thing. You have sufficient emergency and inpatient management skills to manage the needs of a small rural community hospital. And you have an extra skill or an advanced skill or an additional skill, depending on which language you like to use, which is useful to that community, which might be, in Queensland, there are 8 defined advanced skills, but you know, they're not tightly defined. Anesthetics, obstetrics, emergency medicine, internal medicine, pediatrics, mental health, and Indigenous health, and remote area skill. So I think the biggest issue that we have is that it's not an issue, but the biggest advantage we have is that working in a rural area forces you to be totally patient-centric, because you have to solve the problem for the patient. And that doesn't necessarily mean you, the individual, but it often means you, the team, has to solve the problem for that patient, because they don't want to travel away. You know that it's not necessarily good for them to travel away, particularly for the frail or the elderly. And so you're much more inclined to push your own knowledge limits, to go home and read up the textbook rather than just referring them on, to talk to your friends, to share information. But at the same time, you have this commitment to quality control that says, so I have a saying that, you know, at some stage in your career, the bright light will come to shine, whether that's in terms of, you know, honours and rewards, or the opposite end, medico-legal investigations or things going wrong. And when that bright light comes to shine, you don't run and hide under a rock and say, oh, but we're from the bush. You actually stand up and sing in the spotlight and say the care that we provide is as good as the care you could get in any similar sized rural facility in Australia. And in fact, in Longreach, we often say it's better. But, you know, that's sibling rivalry rather than being pompous.
Thank you, David. And I think one of the other benefits of rural practice is, you know, the incredible professional development opportunities that come your way. And Natalie, I'd like if we could turn to you, because currently you work as a midwife, but when you first moved to Longreach over 4 years ago, you worked as an emergency medical nurse.
Yeah, so really similar story to like Mede and Jake, etc. Like planned to move here for a year. My husband's a paramedic. We have 2 small children. And we're like, yep, we'll just go rural for a year and we'll save lots of money and yeah, we'll go back to Brisbane and I don't know, continue on our life. But we moved here when our little girl was 6 months old and she's almost 5. So it's been 4.5 years since we've been here. And in that time, yeah, I was a pediatric nurse in Brisbane. So all I ever did was specialise in pediatric nursing, never did adults. So I came out here being like, all right, I've got to look after a chest pain. I've got to look after whatever comes through the door. And I quickly developed those skills. I knew I always wanted to be a midwife and the opportunity came to me at the Longreach Hospital. I would hassle the nurse unit manager at the time to put me through as a student and yep, the opportunity came up and I jumped on it. It was excellent because I was a paid registered nurse student, so I was in a paid 0.6 position, which was great for us financially, but also yeah, you felt part of the team as well. And then also another bonus that Central West did for me is they paid $5,000 towards my HEX through the SARAS program, which is the Study and Research Assistance Scheme. So, which was just another incentive. And the idea behind that is growing your own. So I've given some time here. I plan to stay here. We're not going anywhere, and you create your own like little workforce, I guess. And there's that succession planning, I guess, for the future.
Yeah, and just amazing that opportunity came, and yeah, a bit like Kat was saying, you were proactive and stepped up to it and took the challenge on. And I think Liz, I understand that you also had a significant professional opportunity that came your way in Longreach. Do you want to share that with us?
Yeah, so my first job out here was not actually in the allied health team. My first job out here was as the project coordinator for the chronic disease program, which there wasn't very much in the space in chronic disease at the time. That was 2009, 2010. So we started to lay some of the foundations around how we can provide better care or better multidisciplinary care for people in our community with complex chronic diseases. So I think I was 3 years out of uni at the time that I took that job. So I think if I had have stayed in a metropolitan or regional site, it would have probably been given to somebody with more experience in that space. So not to say it wasn't an extremely steep learning curve, but I think that the support that you do get out here when you are put into those situations is quite good, because there's a lot of understanding that a lot of the times you're starting into positions that you maybe haven't done before. So there is a lot of support around how do we get to getting you up to speed and getting you working successfully and achieving in the role that you've been placed into.
And I think you're sort of touching on how important collaborative practice is, Liz, to everything that you've all talked about tonight. And I just want to remind everyone that to please use the question and answer tab. We're happy to include questions to the speakers from the students that are listening to us tonight. Please take this opportunity to kind of delve into the wisdom and knowledge of those who have walked the path before you. they'll be happy to share that knowledge with you. But I think at this point, what we'll do is we'll move on to the next video, which shows Natalie in the workplace, which was at Longreach Hospital.
I worked in emergency here and I worked in the ward. Did about a year of general nursing here. I would come down and help the midwives if in an emergency situation, or just interacting with their pregnant ladies when they're walking past and, you know, guiding them which way to go. So yeah, I did have some close interaction with the midwives. If they ever needed, they could call us down the hallway and we were always there. So pretty unique, because you don't always get to do that in the bigger hospitals. So that was a cool opportunity to see how they work. And then I thought, no, I wanted to become a midwife. So I started watching the midwives down the hallway, and I jumped on the opportunity when a student position came up. I went through JCU, which is in Townsville, and I was employed part-time as a student midwife, but in a nursing role. So I was a paid employee, but while studying. So that was really unique. My education has been incredible. I've been able to attend all the courses that I've needed to mandatory attend. My support from my manager has been incredible. Her knowledge base has been amazing. So she shares that knowledge with me all the time. The doctors are incredible. They spend a lot of time teaching me suturing techniques, just always supporting me and supporting my decision making, and it's all very collaborative. They know my name, you know, I'm not just another staff member. They trust me, I trust them, we know how each other work, so it's really unique in that, that sense. I have 2 little kids and a husband at home, so I work around their hours and my husband's hours as well. We're on call 24 hours, but we get 2 days off call a week. You know, the caseload is smaller than the average hospital, but you never know how your day is going to go. You can be doing a birth one day and the next day you're resussing a unwell child and flying them out. So when things happen in Longreach, they happen fairly quick, and we have to be on our A game. I think that it's just been such a good opportunity to be able to work out here. I love Longreach. I can't see when I'm ever going to leave. We came out here to do a year and it's just gone 4 and we have no plan on leaving.
Thank you, Natalie. That was fantastic. I love the picture of the hospital with the kangaroo outside. Very rural. And I think this is probably a good time for us to start to sort of have a look at relationships. You know, we've talked about relationships, you know, that you form in the workplace, but there's also those relationships that you have as partners, as husbands and wives. And I just wanted to talk to some of you about that. And Jacob, I think you're an unusual example. You've managed to actually bring almost a whole family into Longreach as part of your support network. Do you want to talk us through how that looks?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I guess, as I said, I flew into town here. I remember two years ago, 1st of October 2018. It was on the public holiday. I just remember that. But yeah, and it was sort of off that whim of just wanting to do a bit of locum stuff. So I really just had the intention to do 2 months, and then probably either go somewhere else or go back home. And basically at the end of that 2 months, I decided to apply for the permanent position. So I contacted my girlfriend and I said, oh, you know, what do you reckon about this? So, and she was all for it. My girlfriend also happens to be a podiatrist. So we met at uni. We've probably been together close to 6 years now. So at that point, she didn't actually really have a job lined up here, but within the month, the job became available at the non-government organisation just down the road from the hospital here in Longreach. And Paris, my girlfriend, ended up going for that position. So within 6 months, Paris moved up here, and she was the other podiatrist in town. So for a little while there, we were the only two podiatrists, and there's been a podiatrist come and gone since then. There was about 6 months Paris working at the non-government organisation, and she ended up we ended up being able to get a position at the hospital, a second position. So Paris started at the hospital, and once that other position became available, I contacted my twin brother, my identical twin, who also happens to be a podiatrist, and I said, "Oh, there's a job going out here. I reckon you'd love it." So he was actually on the Gold Coast at the time, because he also just wanted to work away from home for a bit, and he was like, "Yeah, great, sounds good. Come out." He had free accommodation, and it paid better than what he was getting at the time as well. So he's been out here a year now. So, and we just absolutely love it. I sort of live just down the road from the hospital in this nice little cul-de-sac, and my twin brother lives directly opposite on an angle. It was, I FaceTime some of my other brothers, and they're like, "That looks exactly like Everybody Loves Raymond." You're just completely opposite. So it's great. I just, it's just turned out something that I never saw coming. So, and 2 years on, we're having a good time.
And do people make jokes about the left foot and the right foot, and that a foot per, one for you and one for your twin brother?
Oh, absolutely. I would say I've heard pretty well every joke there is. So, but I mean, even sometimes you just walk into someone, you bump into someone in the street, and they'll just strike up conversation straight up, and you can't get a word in. So a couple minutes in, you're like, "Look, I don't know you. I'm really sorry, but I think you've mistaken me for my twin brother."
Well, I think one of the questions that's come into that's come up online, which obviously does not apply to you, Jacob, was it easy to make friends? I would assume people have their own have their established friendship groups. Kat, do you want to talk about your experience of what to answer that question?
Sorry, Meredith, in relation to new?
Yeah, to that sense of social isolation that you may have experienced when you went into the community, when you moved to Longreach. Was that part of your experience?
To be honest, it wasn't. Mm-hmm. And I think it's been raised a couple of times. Just being in the community, first of all, you've got these great relationships with the people that you work with, and you also socialize with them. Mm. And the community is just so accepting and giving and welcoming, so welcoming. And especially if you stay on board, they just take you in, and it's lovely.
Sure. Lisa, did you experience a sense of social isolation when you first moved to Longreach?
No, I wouldn't say that I did. My plan for when I moved to Longreach was definitely to just say yes to everything that came my way. And I think that served me very well, but it meant that I was pretty busy pretty quickly. In my first 6 months living in Longreach, I was playing 3 different sports every week, and I became a member of the local church because I was going to church back home in Brisbane, where I was from. And I kind of just said yes to every event and everything that anyone invited me to, which put me out of my comfort zone quite a bit, but it just meant that you meet a lot of people very quickly.
So would anybody like to speak to their experience of social isolation? Or do you all feel like you were welcomed, or was it a period of adjustment for any of you?
For me, I'll jump in. I would say when I first came out, I thought, oh man, it was completely different, like just visually, like it was just pretty open and barren. And I thought, oh man, what have I done? Because I just came from such a sort of populated area. I would say I had a couple of hours of social isolation, and I thought, oh no, this is going to be a long 2 months. And my first day, our wonderful OT, Lisa Lloyd, just walked in and said, "Hi, I'm Lisa. Welcome to Longreach. Come to the river this afternoon." I said, "Yeah, sure." And I was gone. No more social isolation. So you pretty well just had no choice but to make friends. So I would definitely say I'm more of an introverted guy. So yeah, it's just been great. Been very social.
Yeah. So, you know, clearly it's Longreach is an extremely supportive community. It's welcoming. There seems to be coffee. Now, one of the questions that's come up is it's great to see so many warm and friendly faces on the panel, and it's clear that Longreach is in good hands. My question is, what do you think are the biggest misconceptions about going rural? For example, you can't get a good coffee. Who wishes to demystify that myth of the coffee?
I can jump in. I think it probably depends on the time of year. Sometimes over the Christmas period, some of the local shops and things like that will close for 2 to 4 weeks. And I think as a semi-local, I'm probably not local yet because I haven't been here for 30 years, but as a semi-local, that can be quite frustrating because you think, I just want a good coffee, or I just want to do something and nothing is open. But I think that's really quite minimal. And it probably also stands as a great point for our community that we do have the capacity that people who own their own small businesses and things like that can actually just stop for 2 weeks and have a break, so that everybody does actually get downtime in their lives, because I think that can be probably a problem at some point if you're not having staff and things like that we do just keep going. So I think that's actually really can be frustrating as the person wanting the coffee, but on the whole, I think you can look at it as a benefit for our community.
David, did you want to add to that, David Rimmer?
Yep, so there's also, the coffee actually brings up a good example of the fact that you've got to solve problems as they occur. So, and technology does change things. So the fact that you can actually get an espresso machine and get semi-reasonable coffee all the time changes things. But if you're out here for a while and you're a coffee nut, then you buy yourself a decent coffee machine and invite all your friends around. There's a bit of a saying that, you know, if you've got 2 people who are interested in the same thing in Longreach, you've got a group, and if you've got 3, you've got a society, and if you've got 4, you've got a club. So we have, at one stage, we had a Gregorian chant group, because there are a few people in town who got around and just like to sing Gregorian chant. So I think solving the problem and not seeing it as a disadvantage but as a challenge, applied to the coffee metaphor, also applies to everything else that you come across. But also just like to make the point, just going back to the issue of social isolation. So I came to Longreach fairly late in my career, in 2013, and I decided to move out. And I spent that's a more difficult time because you don't have lots of other young people around, and everybody's got established networks. And a lot of the people who've been there a long time do get a bit of, new friend fatigue, because they become friends with people for 5 to 7 years and then they move on, and then they've got to go through the whole process again. And so it can be hard to crack into those circles. So I made a concerted effort when I arrived to get involved in some of the community processes and the stuff that I've done with, say, with the local Rotary group, and just with a group of mates we put together who just happened to like going cycling on the weekends, those sorts of things. Just knowing the people at work who found me a dog. Those sorts of things are something you have to put yourself out for. So you do have to go out with the idea that it is important to become a part of the community, and you have to work at being part of the community, but you also create the community. So, you know, the example on the weekend, I sort of just happened to rock into the coffee shop at Bar Calden, and all the allied health team were there, you know, like introducing a couple of new people to the team. And I thought, you know, what a great advertisement for Central West that people get together and welcome each other.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, David. And I think that kind of brings up the theme that you've spoken about offline, about how you come together as teams in a sporting capacity. I understand there's a touch football team, of which 4 of you are members, and David Walker, you're the ref. Is this correct?
Yeah, look, I think there's many members of the Longreach hospital community, wider community, that are part of the touch football comp. I guess I made the decision that I was too old to play a couple of years ago, but I've been refereeing for well, the whole time I've been here. To be honest, I actually really enjoy it. It's really hard to get referees in small towns, and so I'm not saying that I'm super at it, but someone had to do it, and I started doing it probably a decade ago, and I've been doing it ever since. And I think it probably echoes a lot of what a few people have said here, that I think you know, I think David just tried to say this as well, is that it doesn't really matter what you do. I think everyone's got different interests, and I think communities our size have lots of different organisations, and it doesn't really matter whether you join the art group or a sporting group or a community group or a church. It's really important to do something outside of work. It just helps kind of shape you as a person and kind of help you meld into the community. So I really think that's the theme that's come out of all of this. I think all of us have got different interests, but all of us have kind of immersed into the community in different ways.
Yeah, thank you, David. I'm just going to pick up on a couple of questions that have come in. Claire, this might be a good question for you to answer. Hearing from everyone, there seems to be a theme of clinical leadership and opportunity for career development that encouraged you to the area. How important is this when selecting a community to work in and stay?
Well, I think one of the big advantages of being in a small community and a small team is the capacity to contribute to the system around you. We all work in really complex systems, and in big hospitals, it's very hard to feel like you have any kind of influence over that system. You're a tiny cog in a very big machine. When you come to a small place, you come with fresh eyes and your own experience and background, and sometimes as the only clinician in an area or part of a small team, and you can bring ideas and change the way we've done stuff. So having been here for 11 years, we've seen lots of people come, and you know, we've seen different services grow. We've seen the direction of different departments take, because we've got someone with a certain interest or a certain skill, and they can bring that along. And then, you know, very quickly, when you're contributing to how a system operates, you can then, you know, step into leadership positions, because you've got the experience of understanding the health system and how it gets put together. So both in your professional capacity at work, but also in the wider health network. So I've recently been president of RDAQ, the Rural Doctors Association, and that often comes about because there is a small number of us remote area doctors. And so, you know, if there's hundreds and there's, you know, often thousands of people who do the same job in the metro areas, but there really is more like tens of doctors in remote Queensland. And so those opportunities present themselves at probably earlier stages of your career. So there is challenges with trying to fit that in your busy life and kids and things like that. But it also adds to the texture of your work. You're not just seeing patients all day. You help run and manage a department, or you know, help influence policy, and you talk to politicians at a state level. So, you know, it all adds to the importance and interest in what you do.
Yeah. And if you get into deep waters, you've always got David to referee.
That's right. We might need a referee in our house sometimes when I don't agree with.
Now, there's another question has come through. This is a great question. Since rural communities generally have smaller, more tight-knit communities, does anyone on the panel have advice on separating work and personal life? If people you know personally present to the clinic hospital, can it have an effect on your relationships afterwards? I'm going to open that up to anybody that wants to speak to that. Who would like to speak?
I think we've all been there, and you probably just have to be a little bit brave and either have the guts to say, I can't see you, and find someone else to see them, or for example, one of my best friends, her son has tried to slice his finger open while cutting up a kangaroo. So is that really a very personal issue that's going to cause us complications in our friendship? Probably not. But if it is something more private, then you probably, you need to think about more than just your job at that point in time. And for most of us, there are other people who do the same role. So you do have that team support that you can, like, we all live here, we all know that it can be challenging. So everybody does try and, accommodate for that.
And I guess there's also the flip side is that sometimes you just can't, like, you'll be the only person in that particular position who can help that person. And sometimes your close friends see you preferentially, and it can be, for a long time, I'm, the more experienced obstetric doctor, so I can't refuse to see my friends because I can't say to them, you have to see one of the trainees. Like, it's one of the really big challenges. And, I think delivering one of your good friend's babies has got to be, is really, I would put it on my stress, radar at about 11. And, and I don't get stressed about many things.
It's also very rewarding
But
too.
it is great. Like, and then you see those kids, you're at school and, they're friends with your kids. It is great, but it is something that it is a bit of the elephant in the room in rural places. It's what everyone worries about. But sometimes you are just the best person in that position to care for that person, regardless of your personal relationship with them.
Yeah, and I think the strategies, the coping strategies you have for that, probably are very different from when you first moved into a new community as to what they may look like at the 5-year and the 10-year mark. And and I think that's it's a journey in itself. Sorry.
I think the biggest difference between now and 15 years ago in terms of that work is that there's so much more information available and support available for boundary development and boundary recognition. So everyone from the medical board down now talks about boundaries. Students are taught about boundaries, and you negotiate boundaries. So, certainly there is a boundary that says, preferentially you understand that there's stress associated with treating your friends. But, if your friend, falls off their bike and you happen to be the only person there, you're not going to say, well, I'm not going to put a Band-Aid on you because, I'm your friend. You just have to get over yourself and deal with it. But at this stage in our society, there are sufficient supports and psychological strategies and learning processes and mentors and senior people you can talk to be able to work through that and to understand it as it arises. So yes, it's a challenge, but we are much better resourced than we were 20 years ago.
Yeah, and I think that's a very important point, the support that you have in that way. I just want to let, we've had quite a few questions have come through, and we won't get time to get to all of them, but we'll certainly be responding by email. which you'll find on the Go Rural Virtually webpage. There's a future workforce email, so please use that if you want to follow up. We're going to now move to a video which is showing us a glimpse of Claire's life outside of the workplace, which Claire very generously shared her private time with us. So we'll just move to that now.
I've lived in Longreach for more than 10 years, and yeah, I love being part of this great community. It's such a fantastic place to raise kids, and you can still also have a truly meaningful and rewarding career here. We know that there are benefits for patients in having that long-term GP, but there's also rewards for the GP. My husband and I were attracted to Longreach for the remote and all-encompassing kind of medicine that you can perform out here, plus the predominantly farming culture of the town. It's big enough in Longreach to play sport, be part of clubs or social activities, but also small enough that pretty much anywhere is a 2-minute commute. We initially did get bailed up a lot in the street or in the pub with medical questions, but the longer we stayed, the more people saw us as just members of the community and respected our time off. We live on a small farm on the edge of town with our 4 kids and a collection of animals. I enjoy getting out for a run on the trails around the town with my running group called the Gidgee Sniffers. I also really love gardening, and I think it's because you put a lot of hard work in and you get the rewards down the track. And having a little bit of green is good for the soul too, I think. Remote medicine does have its challenges. Having to treat your friends at times definitely puts the pressure on, but the flip side is there is an advantage in knowing your patient's whole history. We still get out of bed at night and work some weekends, but the old days of working 80+ hour weeks are totally gone. These connections, they're formed through a really long-term commitment to a town. The sensation of having a job that makes a big impact on the lives of those around you is a very profound feeling. It's about looking after a community who then looks after you.
Thank you for sharing that, Claire. That's fantastic to see you at home in the garden. We take away from that kind of the nurturing quality that you bring to the workplace, but also to your home. And I think, over the, time that we've been working with all of you to bring Go Rural Virtually to life, I've come to think of you and David as the sort of as the custodians of the of Longreach community, and I guess to pick up on what David was saying, you've created a boundary, but it's a boundary that people can cross backwards and forwards, and you have all developed extremely close relationships with one another, and I think. There are times, like when your own health is an issue and you need that support. There's times when relationships are a struggle and you need that support. And I want to turn to Liz now. And Liz, just if you could share with us, your personal experience of how the community was able to support you.
Yeah, so when I first moved out here, I moved out with my now ex-husband. We've got 2 kids, a house, 2 dogs. But I think a lot of people expected that when we split up that I would probably leave. But the community here has been so helpful and so strong in supporting that I think I have more support here without my family than I would living closer to my family. And that's in the sense that your friends become your family, but also in the sense that the Central West Hospital and Health Service has been particularly supportive. They're very good as far as flexible work hours go, and I think David and Claire could agree with me on that, we all have kids and we want to get to school events and we want to be able to be there for our kids as well as doing the jobs that we do. And the health service has really supported that. So I still work full time, but 1 week when I do have my kids with me, I work 30 hours. On the weeks they're with their dad, I work 50 hours to balance out to working full time. And I don't think that many places in a metro setting would give you that flexibility or have the capacity to do it in their workflows. So it has been a real benefit to being out here, being a solo parent and still being able to be the allied health team leader or the director of allied health and achieve things in my career, as well as kicking goals with your kids and being there for the things that they want you there for.
Thank you, Liz. And David Walker, I just want to come back to you and the theme of nurturing. I know that you're also a keen gardener, you're particularly handy with roses, which I believe you that's part of a feature of the racetrack in Longreach. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is, although it probably wouldn't be fair if I didn't mention the fact that the day I ordered the roses in, they arrived at a day I was stuck at work late and Claire had to plant them all. So there's 50 roses at the racecourse and they were planted by Claire, but I would argue that ever since then I've done most of the work on them. But look, I think, I thank Liz for that. That's really nice. I think it's a beautiful example of what we try to do here. We're a small workforce and we all know each other. We all work together. We spend every day with each other and we're not always super close friends with each other either. I should say we don't all hang around each other's back pockets, but I think the fact that we all, we just have a great community here in Longreach, both the clinical community and also the broader community of Longreach itself, which we've talked about. And I think that nurturing is, I think most of us probably came for the clinical work. Most of us, in our case, we came for the medicine, we came for the autonomy and the breadth of stuff we see, but I suspect a lot of us stayed for the community, which is, that's what's keeping us here. And it's just a wonderful nurturing place. And, I often joke that I couldn't lose my kids in Longreach if I tried to. And, not that I have tried to, but I certainly have situations where we've been at fates and other things where our children will wander off as they tend to do and someone will just bring them back. It's just that kind of place.
Yeah, I think, my understanding, David, is that you also have, you're very passionate about mental health.
Yeah, so my advanced skill, I guess I noticed early on that I didn't really have the same kind of passion for obstetrics and anaesthetics, which was the classical rural doctor skill. Claire does both of those for us. But I guess I realised that people were coming to see me about mental health issues, and I just had a kind of a natural affinity for it. I probably best to say. So I went away and did some training in that, and so my advanced training is mental health, and it's just great to be able to do that for people. There's nothing for me more rewarding than seeing someone who is really floridly depressed, for example, recover from depression. It's one of the most rewarding things in my career. It still brings a tear to my eye just about every day. So yes, have an interest in it. Can't say I get to do it as much as I would like to these days with my other roles as well, but still have a role in supporting our other practitioners. And we're now lucky enough in the Central West to have 3 GPs who have a particular interest in training in mental health, so across the whole of Central West. Yeah,
that's fantastic. So you've got 3 podiatrists and 3 mental health professionals, and just a fantastic opportunity tonight to hear from you all. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of Go Rural Virtually. But before we go, there's some thank yous I want to give. And also we have a final video that we want to share with you. But I do want to thank all of you, the panelists, speakers, from Longreach for taking us into your stories and for sharing your love of the community you've formed, and both in and outside of the workplace. That was so clear to us all tonight. I want to thank all the students who travelled virtually to Longreach tonight. We encourage you to travel with us again in February, when Go Rural Virtually will visit another rural Queensland community. In the meantime, if you're inspired to undertake a rural placement and need financial assistance to cover accommodation or transport costs, please contact Health Workforce Queensland using the email at the bottom of the Go Rural Virtually webpage. And I also want to acknowledge the role that Diana Holt played. Diana works in the Future Workforce team. She took the lead for this project. She has done an amazing job. She went above and beyond, and you'll hear her music at the end of the as the credits roll up. She is just an amazing person to work with. I'm so grateful to her, but I'm grateful to all of you. So it's been an amazing evening. We want to close with an equally amazing video David Walker did a few years back with Queensland Rural Generous Pathway that speaks to the importance of community wellbeing for everyone. Thank you and good night.
On a big race day, the atmosphere is noisy and dusty and people laughing and just really enjoying themselves. It can be just wonderful. The social aspect and its role in a community is really important. It's a chance to get out and catch up and forget about things when times aren't so good. We often thought that our crowds would decrease in drought, but they actually got bigger. And I think it's because people just take a chance to get together and catch up and forget about things for a bit. It's a very special part of my job to do mental health. For me, mental illness robs people of function. So my interest in mental health allows me to do my best to get them better, to get them back into society and back doing what they would normally do.
Part of being a wildlife photographer is not only knowing photography, you need to know wildlife. Be ready to grab those images that you know are about to happen. It's just a way of capturing the environment I live in and sharing it with the world. We're in a long period of drought, and I think that's what started it all off. We had cows dying and having to either shoot or raise young calves. There was a whole heap of stuff going on, which is day-to-day life in droughts, but this time, instead of bouncing back from it, I just sort of fell into a pit, and it's hard to describe, but it's a feeling of as though nothing's going right and you can't make things go right, and there's no use doing what you're doing, and you just sort of spiral down into this big, deep pit of despair. So I was very, very lucky to live within 2 hours of a town with a doctor who actually had a strong interest and specialised in mental health, because I don't know if I would have made it without the expert help of Dr. Walker and the team up there. I gradually came around and came good, and yeah, I'm feeling good. They talk about managing the black dog, but as far as I'm concerned, I've shot the bastard.
I guess in some ways, the importance I give to work-life balance and the importance that I put on people having an interest is reflected in what I look for when I see someone getting better. Angus is a good example of why I do my job. You know, to be able to start to develop that passion for his photography and his passion for his land care stuff was great. It's a rewarding feeling that I get for seeing people get better, and he is a personal example of someone who has gotten better. And I guess that's why I do my job out here. I would really strongly recommend being a rural journalist. It's such an important job, even outside of my mental health stuff. It's such an interesting job. It allows you to do so many different things and to have a role in a community and have a job that's rewarding and interesting. And then if you choose an advanced skill that you're interested in, it allows you just to take medicine that step further than you wouldn't get to do back in the city.
That was awesome, guys. Thank you so much. How did it go for you?
I'll stop recording now, just so it's. Oh no, okay.